Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming today. We appreciate your attendance at the webinar. We're going to get started. We should have a few more people coming in as we go along. My name is Tom Petersen. I'm the president of Environmental and Engineering Solutions. We are a health and safety and environmental consulting firm. We're located just north of Philadelphia, and we've been in business for 25 years. So I want to give you a couple of just quick pointers today in terms of the length of the webinar and what we're going to be discussing today. So we will present for about 45 minutes in total. So we should be complete around 1:45 or 1:50, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So if you have questions, if you wouldn't mind placing them in the Q&A tab. You should see that at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about that, you can maybe put something in the chat function. But essentially, if you put your questions in the Q&A, that'll make it easier for us to find them and answer those questions at the end of the webinar. If we don't have the answers or we don't have time to answer all the questions at the end, we will definitely follow up with you and provide you with answers to your questions. Go. Next slide, Jay. All right, so just a little bit more about my company. Again, we're about 25 years old. We were founded in 1996. We provide air quality, environmental, health and safety, ventilation design, and sustainability consulting services. The types of industries we serve, we do a lot in the healthcare space. We do a good bit of work in higher education, and then a substantial amount in various types of manufacturing industry, basically helping facility managers, plant managers, environmental managers to comply with the environmental and health and safety regulations. All right, so just a little bit more about our health and safety consulting portion of our services. So we put together OSHA health and safety programs for facilities. We put together health and safety plans for things like HAZWOP or cleanup operations. We provide training for OSHA compliance. We also provide industrial hygiene services. So if you need somebody to do personal exposure monitoring or noise monitoring and provide that service for your employees, we will provide the IH services and provide reports back to the manufacturer or the hospital, and also whatever notifications are required for the employees themselves. I'll introduce Jay Dimler in a second. He'll be our main speaker, but Jay and I have been working together for about 25 years. And Jay has been providing a fair amount of that, the health and safety services that we provide through EES. And, as well, he has his own consulting practice. But a couple of the other things would be lockout, tagout. Like, for example, Jay just did a project providing a control matrix and risk analysis for a facility for about 100 pieces of equipment. And then one thing we've been doing for about the past 9 months is we are providing health and safety, on-site health and safety services for a local university. So we're acting as their health and safety officer. So now what I want to do is just quickly introduce Jay Dimler. Jay Dimler is the president of JWD Associates. And as I mentioned, he and I have been working together for a long while. He has quite a substantial background in training and OSHA compliance. And Jay, why don't I let you take it from there and introduce yourself a little bit more. So enjoy the presentation.
All right, thanks, Tom, and good afternoon, everyone. As Tom said, I've been doing this for about 34 years now, and as a safety professional. It's been a long journey, an interesting one, and welcome everyone to the webinar. You know, as Tom mentioned, we're going to give you some oversight and some insight, hopefully, on you know, some of the updates to the OSHA regs. The first slide I have here is just a partial slide of the OSHA organizational chart. And if you follow this, you may know that for the first time since 2017, there's been a confirmed Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health. So that individual is Doug Parker, which you see in the middle of the screen there. And you know, in terms of the organizational chart, you can see some other individuals towards the bottom of the slide there. There are more. It was too large to put on here, but wanted to give you some of his top associates within OSHA. So you know, under the new administration, they finally got confirmation on this. It was a 50-41 vote, and you can imagine you know, some of the partisanship that occurs within our government around this nomination. But there is an official assistant secretary, and again, his name is Doug Parker. Just a little bit about his background. He's an attorney, comes from the labor side, was the head of Cal OSHA, if you are familiar with that. There are states that have their own individual plans, California being one of them. And again, if you're familiar with the states that have individual plans, California on the West Coast and New Jersey on the East Coast are some of the more difficult states to navigate in terms of regulations. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, what he brings to the table, and that's what we're going to talk about here in the next 45 minutes or so, as Tom said. Just a little bit about the penalties now, and I always like to touch on this. Hopefully, you don't get into any citations, but if you do, in the last, I guess 3 or 4 years, the penalties were frozen. All right, and now there were some new regulations that were promulgated. They now increase every year through cost of living. And this year, for 2022, you can see what a typical violation will look like. So there are different categories with the violations. You can see serious, other than serious, failure to abate, and then willful or repeat violations can be assigned by OSHA. And that's typically a per violation. So, you know, the calculator can come out, and you can get some pretty pricey violations depending on how many they find in a particular industry. I don't know what the mix is on the webinar here of industries, but if you have a question around that, please put it in the chat or Q&A, and we'll try and answer it for you. But they have gone up substantially. You know, last year, I think it was 13,532. So you can expect year to year it going up, cost of living about $1,000 a violation. And as you can see by the bottom of this chart, if you get into willfuls or repeateds, you know, you can see a substantial penalty there in terms of a first time. So 145,000 27 hurts in the pocketbook a little bit. Also, you know, you could get on the OSHA website, and that is www.osha.gov. Good place for information in terms of citations. And, you know, all these citations, all this information is public domain information. So, you know, as I always tell my clients, it's not a place you want to be on the OSHA webpage, where you can look up violations and companies and do searches on past history. So I like to touch on that, and obviously that's not a place you want to be as an organization. All right. So on here, I have most frequently cited OSHA standards during fiscal year 2021 inspections. And again, for most of you, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but I got the top 10 on here. They don't change too much year to year. However, fall protection, which as you can see here, gets into the first one and also the seventh one, are moving up and becoming more prevalent in terms of violations that are cited for companies. So you can see there, fall protection in construction. And again, I don't know how many of you may be from the construction industry, but it is a major issue. Slips, trips, and falls, always the number one causation, whether you're in maritime, general industry, construction. You know, it's always on the top of the radar there. And as you can see, there were 5,295 violations issued. If you want to dig deeper into the numbers around that, you can go to the OSHA website. There's a lot of information there to see what the numerical fines were. Number two, respiratory protection. That's always in the top 10. It's usually about 5 or 6 this year, or last year, I should say, moved up to number 2. And a lot of that was because of COVID. Unless you were in a cave for the last couple of years, you know, COVID impacted tremendously the healthcare industry. And if you look back on their citations and what was the breakdown there, a lot of them were respiratory violations, fit testing, training, etc. So that moved that up into the number 2 slot. You can see there, ladders, all right, is number 3. And again, in my profession, it is amazing how many people fall off of ladders, how many citations are around it, and a lot of those citations are labeling. So one thing I always recommend to my clients, go out in your workplace, look at your ladders. If the labels are not legible, you have the potential to get a citation. It's as simple as calling up Werner or whoever the manufacturer of your ladder is, giving them the serial number or product number, and they will either send you updated labels, or you can typically print them out right from their website and reinstall them yourself. Okay, but in that ladder, that 2026, I'm gonna say probably a quarter of those were just labeling. All right, so always in the top 10. You can see scaffolding. Again, those are construction. So when you see 1926, that is construction. When you see 1910, that's general industry. All right, but Scaffolding is always a big thing in construction, and if you get into that, you know, it's always something that you have to make sure your employees are trained on, they're erected correctly, and you're following the regulation there under the scaffold. Hazard communication, we're going to touch on that a little bit here later in the program, but always in the top 10. You know, anyone out there who has to manage safety data sheets or a hazard communication program knows the headache behind that. You know, SDS management is a nightmare, especially for those companies that, you know, have over 500 SDSs or chemicals. A lot of those citations are training. So, you know, you got to make sure your employees are trained. They know the labeling and, you know about the global hazard, GHS, global hazard standard. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Lockout, tag out, the next one on there. Again, if you're an industry, hopefully you know about control of hazardous energy, which is the official standard term. Everyone calls it lockout, tag out, but you can see there, you know, 1,698 violations. That standard has been around since OSHA was promulgated in the 70s, in 1970, and it is always, always, always in the top 10. So, you know, if you don't have a good control of hazardous energy program, you don't have hazardous energy control procedures, your employees aren't trained on how to lock and tag out equipment, you are going to be in that citation number. And it's one of the top things an OSHA compliance officer looks at when they come into your facility. Fall protection in general industry. You can see there, you got about 1,600 of them. Personal protective equipment. There's a requirement to make sure that, you know, you have a PPE audit and it's written down. A lot of companies miss that part. They don't have a evaluation of their PPE and why they require their employees to wear certain types, whether it's eye protection, hearing protection, respiratory protection, foot protection, etc. So very important to make sure that you don't get caught up in that citation pool there. Powered industrial trucks. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Powered pallet jacks, sit-down rider trucks, stand-up trucks, order pickers, etc. All falls under 1910-178. And they're looking to update that with a proposed notice of proposed rulemaking, and we'll touch on that a little bit. And then number 10 there is machine guarding. So if you have a lot of equipment in your facility, you need to make sure it is guarded appropriately. And for those companies that buy equipment from overseas, whether it be from Germany or China or wherever, you need to make sure that the guarding is up to the standards of 1910-212. All right. I see a lot of companies, they buy a piece of equipment, they think, oh, it's coming from the manufacturer, it's good to go, and install it, and then they have some exposed points of operation, and it is not guarded to the standard, and that becomes a problem. OSHA comes in and cites companies. So take a look at your equipment, make sure it is properly guarded, and you'll stay out of that particular citation pool. So I see a chat that came in here. The question is, are these penalties outside of facilities? Not quite sure what you're talking about there. if you could elaborate on that.
It's fatalities, not facilities.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are these penalties outside of fatalities? Sorry. No, they're from a fatality. OSHA may come in, and then there may be citations issued. So it depends on the particular compliance officer and what they find. All right. So the next couple of slides are information. Last week, the American Bar Association, which has a conference every year. It's typically a 3-day, and it's a bunch of lawyers, which I am not a lawyer, but I follow this particular conference. And Doug Parker, who I mentioned before, was down there speaking. So this is, as I say, right from the horse's mouth on some of the initiatives that are being looked at by OSHA. Obviously, number one there is COVID. And again, unless you were had your head buried in the sand, there was an initiative by OSHA to have employers over 100 employees follow strict COVID protocols. That was struck down by the Supreme Court. But from that, there's still an initiative by OSHA to come up with some COVID-19 protocols. So that's in development. Keep your eyes and ears open for that. We may have some people from the healthcare industry. They are still under, all right, the temporary standard, emergency standard for protocols. So healthcare still has to follow what the OSHA regs are around that, but the general industry for that was out there that got struck down by the Supreme Court was non-healthcare based. So, but moral of the story, OSHA's still looking at it. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. We'll see what transpires in the next couple of months. Another comment that Mr. Parker made at the conference, there's an initiative by OSHA to take a look at the trends around high-risk work affecting people of color. You know, the statistics that OSHA has and that you can find on the OSHA website breaks down high-risk work, medium-risk work, low-risk work. And there's a big initiative, as Mr. Parker said, to look at high-risk work affecting people of color. The third bullet there, supporting safe jobs in construction. All right, construction, very dangerous. It's high-risk work. OSHA is going to emphasize through some of the programs that I'm going to talk about here later in the presentation to make sure that construction work, the high risk around it, is being reduced to eliminate deaths, eliminate injuries that may affect the construction industry. And then the last bullet there, it says revitalizing its health and safety occupational program. So, you know, as I said, Mr. Parker is the first leader in about 4 years. And so there's going to be a refocusing with the new administration on getting information out to companies to make sure they focus and emphasize on the importance of safety and health programs for companies overall. A couple other things that he touched on, heat-related hazards. There is a heat illness standard in the works. There's a lot of debate now, and if this impacts you, again, I'm not sure of the mix of who's on this this particular webinar, but obviously in Arizona, Florida, Texas, you know, where you have heat hazards throughout the year, this is a big issue, and it's been a big issue for OSHA. You know, even in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, you know, northeastern corridor in the summers, you can have some high temperatures, some high humidity, and they're trying to put more emphasis and give more detail about those hazards and actually promulgate a standard. Right now, they're debating whether it needs to be prescriptive or performance-based. And for those of you who may deal with this a lot, you know, OSHA has a heat illness application where you can pull in geographic information, weather information, and based on what your workers are doing, it'll give you quantitative data on breaks and heat indexes, et cetera. So it's a very good app if you get into that. It's one of the top initiatives by OSHA to try and promulgate some type of heat illness standard. So keep your eyes and ears open. It's not there yet, but it's coming. Right now, they're in the comment period. So again, if you're not familiar with how OSHA promulgates standards, they put out what's called a notice of proposed rulemaking that you can view. They have a comment period where everyone gets to put their comments in, and it's interesting reading sometimes when those those comment periods are open. They do a review. They typically have another comment period, and then they decide on enacting a standard. And some of those standards get challenged, as the COVID standard did, and sometimes goes to the Supreme Court if there's an issue. So the heat illness standard is in the, I think it's the second comment period. So if this impacts you, I would say you can get on the OSHA website, take a look at that, and make your appropriate comments. And they do read every comment. They address every comment. It's part of the rulemaking process. And as you can imagine, that's why it takes so long for a new standard to get promulgated, or an existing standard to get changed. If any of you are familiar with the OSHA permissible exposure limits, over the last 15 years, there's been a big push to update those, and it has just been a boondoggle, so to speak, to try and change those and update them. We're still going off of PELs from the 60s and 70s. All right, so they've tried to update some, can't do it overall. There's been some individual standards, the hexavalent chromium standard, silica standard, et cetera, where they were able to update the permissible exposure limits, but to do them all in one shot has had a lot of resistance. Another bullet there, you can see safety inequality in the workplace. So interesting term, again, addressing the issues of our times, and you know, looking at different segments of the population, and trying to address certain, and you can see I'm hesitating here, certain parts of the country certain demographics where there is a perceived inequality about how safety is administered. So again, keep your eyes and ears open about that. It's going to be interesting to see what that actually means. And then the last one there is staffing throughout OSHA and occupational safety and health. And that's both in the government. And we'll talk a little bit about how the budget has increased under the new administration. And they're going to be hiring more compliance officers, more support staff, et cetera, to increase and be out there conducting inspections, but also trying to promulgate more standards. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be interesting in the next 3 years. So we'll see what happens there. From that seminar, there were a couple of key people that spoke that work within the Department of OSHA. And I have Seema Nanda, who's the solicitor, and basically, and this is behind the scenes stuff, but there's some what we call misclassification in terms of employees. The officer solicitation is going to look at that to try and make sure that classifications, and again, this is a little bit inside baseball, are done correctly. Another thing she mentioned is early intervention and retaliation cases, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with the whistleblower slide that I have later on in the presentation. And then workplace violence. Workplace violence is something that is more and more prevalent. Companies have a responsibility to provide a safe and healthy working environment, and workplace violence has no standard around it, but it falls under the general duty clause. So it is an emphasis for OSHA. I would say it should be an emphasis in your organization as well, especially if you have companies that are interacting with the public, where there could be an issue of workplace violence. It's important that you address that and make sure that you have some good programs in place. And obviously, we can help you with that. Two other individuals that spoke, Kimberly Still and Deon Williams. Again, deal with, as Mr. Parker said, trying to get some updated COVID regulations and treating COVID as an endemic instead of pandemic, as we've been dealing with. So we'll see how that comes out. I talked about focus on heat-related hazards and the heat illness standard. Updating and streamlining its enforcement policies. So if anyone has unfortunately gone through a citation and an inspection, there's timing issues around that. And, sometimes it can take up to 6 months before anything's issued, depending on, the situation or the standard and the citation. So there's a big push to try and streamline that. We'll see how that goes, but according to the Director of Enforcement, that is something they're looking at. Protecting vulnerable and underserved workers is another issue that they're going to look at. And again, you get into some of this with some of the minority groups and individuals who are non-English speaking. in making sure that they understand the standards. And I'll say this, I've been involved in many OSHA inspections. And in the last 2 to 3 years, one of the main questions is, do you have non-English speaking employees, and how are you training them? So if you go on the OSHA website, they offer a lot of training materials, and they also offer a lot of those materials in languages other than English. So take advantage of that, but also make sure that your training materials are in a language that can be understood by your workers. I know we all try and hire workers and say we hire workers that are English speaking, but we know how that goes, and so does OSHA. So take a look at that within your programs and policies. The last bullet there is reaffirming OSHA's focus on using the general duty clause, all right, around COVID and other hazards that don't have a specific standard, okay? And as you can see there, it says there will be some updated guidance that will be published soon. And I have that in quotation marks. And as you know, with our government, who knows what soon means. But again, COVID-19, big focus. They're trying to, entice companies to do the right thing through CDC guidance, and whatever your belief pattern is on that. And it has been a little confusing for safety professionals as well as business leaders to navigate the COVID requirements. But OSHA is trying to give a little bit more definitive insight on COVID regulations. So we'll see how that pans out in the next year or so. All right. Oops. I have this slide, which is called Focus 4. And this is something, if you go on the OSHA webpage, you'll see this, especially under construction. OSHA is focusing on these 4 main hazards: falls, struck by, electrocutions, caught in or between. And so falls, we talked about slip, trips, and falls, ladder safety, the walking, working surfaces, they all contribute. And when OSHA looks at the statistics, falls is always in the top 5. So they focus on this, they put information out, and I suggest all my clients, there's good resources, whether it's training materials, PowerPoints, etc. Around all 4 of these. You can go on the OSHA website and get some very good free information, all right, and use it. Struck by, gets into driving safety. It can also be struck by in the workplace, powered industrial trucks, etc. Number 3 there, electrocutions, still happening. And then, of course, that's a part of control of hazardous energy, along with general electrical safety. So the 4th one there is caught in between, and that deals with a lot of machine guarding. So as you'll see, and I talked about already, the top 10 citations sort of address all of these, and OSHA does a good job of quantifying and then putting together programs for industry, construction, maritime, agricultural, to focus on these 4 particular high hazard issues. All right. Next slide talks about national emphasis programs, or NEPs. So OSHA every year issues these national emphasis programs. So I just picked 5. There's typically about 10 to 15 on the list. And you can see combustible dust, coronavirus, hazardous machinery, hexavalent chromium, and lead. All right. Number 6 is silica, which there has been a big push around the new silica standard and the PELs. If you get into that from a construction standpoint, and you're cutting block or concrete work, etc., demolition, you definitely need to know about the silica standard, which is number 6 there. But going down here, combustible dust, you can see there was a program that was issued in 2008 around it. It's still out there. If you have combustible dust operations, you have organic material, grain silos, sugar processing, corn processing, etc., where you can have a combustible dust. You need to pay attention to that. That is going to be an emphasis in 2022. Coronavirus, as we discussed, is there. Hazardous machinery, again, you can see that was issued 2019. It's still on the top 10 in terms of citations and injuries, and that's why OSHA has made it a national emphasis program. Hexavalent chromium, if you get into welding of stainless steel and processing of chromium, you need to be aware of that. And then the last one there is lead. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about infrastructure. And a lot of water companies are changing out piping to address this issue. If you paid attention to what happened in Detroit many years ago, that's still an ongoing thing. And so we have some old infrastructure out there where lead's still an issue. And obviously in the welding industry, plumbing industry, where people are dealing with galvanized, it is an issue. So something to keep an eye on. But those are national emphasis programs. Then those are pushed down to the regions. And I have this slide here where it talks about local emphasis programs. So your local OSHA office can identify other programs based on the statistics, and we call those local emphasis programs. So the next 2 slides are just talking about Region 2. And again, I don't know the demographics here of who's on this particular webinar, but Region 2 is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. All right, that's Region 2. And you can go on the OSHA website and see how the regions are broken out. Region 3 is Delaware, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. All right. I am located in York, Pennsylvania. So I'm near the capital of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg. That's why I have Mr. Chambers' name on there. He is he's fairly new director, probably within the last year. The directors don't change too often. In Pennsylvania, there are 6 area offices based on the geography, obviously, of the state. And all of those offices, that's where the compliance officers are stationed and they work out of. They have good resources should you have questions. Obviously, if someone calls into OSHA to file a complaint, it will go to the regional office. All right. In New Jersey, there are 5 state offices. The head office is in Trenton. Delaware, obviously a smaller state. They have 1 office in Wilmington, and as I mentioned before, that's the same region as Pennsylvania. So just wanted to give you a little outline of the three local states. Hold on here, let me see. Yeah. I got some questions here and I will address that. Let me go through these slides real quickly here. Couple of things that are in the pipeline. Hazard communication. All right. Hopefully everyone knows back in 2012, new standard was issued based off of the global harmonized system, the GHS. OSHA is trying to update to the new GHS, which is, I think, version 7, and deals with the program, the container labeling, the safety data sheets. So you may see some information on updating that particular standard. Powered industrial truck standard is notice of proposed rulemaking, and they're just trying to update it to the most recent construction standards as referenced by the ANSI standards and the Industrial Truck Standards Foundation. So this standard has not been changed since '71. There was some modifications to it, but they're looking to do an update to the Powered Industrial Truck Standard, which is 1910-178. Just a couple of comments here. Record keeping forms, sure everyone's aware, you got to do it. The posting was required to be put up by February 1st through April. And for some companies, depending on the number of employees they have, you also have to report that information into the injury tracking application, or the ITA. Just a little bit about whistleblower, and that's one of the focuses. OSHA handles all whistleblower complaints through safety and health, motor carrier, consumer product, environmental, financial, food safety. A lot of people don't know that, but there's an emphasis on whistleblower. Right. Obviously, hopefully you never have any fatalities or severe injuries, but if you do, there are requirements where you must report that to OSHA. And you can see, obviously, if an employee is killed on the job, suffers a work-related hospitalization, and that's one employee hospitalized. All right, if someone goes to the hospital, but then is released, they don't have an overnight stay, you don't have to report it. But if they are hospitalized, all right, you do have to call and report that. Amputation has to be reported, and then a loss of an eye. All right, and there's criteria around that. If you need any more information, let us know. Okay, but there are reporting requirements around that. A lot of information out there that OSHA provides. Just have, they do a lot for small business because they realize they can't have a potential full-time EHS person. So there's a lot of publications out there. As you can see, I just have a couple here, and you can go to the links on the OSHA web page and see that. They have a lot of outreach, training, education. I'm an authorized outreach trainer, 10 and 30-hour cards. Right now, they're going through the Susan Harwood training grants, where organizations can apply, get money to provide training for client companies. So a lot of good things that that OSHA provides. If you've heard of any of these stand downs that come up, OSHA always has a fall prevention stand down, May 6th through the 10th of this year. A lot of resources, a lot of information. You can opt in as an organization to say, hey, we're going to do this stand down, show our employees that we support safety and health around fall prevention. So that's coming up May 6th this year. As I said, a lot of information on heat illness and prevention. And if you go on the OSHA webpage, you'll see this information pop up. And then a big initiative around trenching in the construction industry. As we said, that's one of the top issues that cause citations and unfortunately injuries or hazards. Couple things to ponder. Drones becoming more prevalent. OSHA's using those to get overhead shots and do certain inspections. They're doing some video inspections. And then there's some new infrastructure legislation that's coming up. Davis-Bacon Act, which is big within the Obama administration. So keep an eye on that. All right, I think that's about it for my slides. We have a couple of questions here.
Great,
Tom,
yeah, just let me say a couple of words and then we'll go through the questions. Yeah, thank you very much, Jay. We really appreciate it. That was quite a bit of information that you covered, and we really appreciate that. So we will be posting this webinar on our website over the next few days. And also we'll be sending out the slides. If you didn't catch some of the information, we'll be sending out the slides to the attendees of the webinar. And we do have a couple of other webinars on our website. One of them is on air permitting, air permit basics. And then we have one on pharmaceutical waste management. So if you're interested in either of those topics, feel free to go to the website eesolutions.net. We've also got quite a collection of blog posts on there dating back, about 10 years. We've been posting blog information on there on various EHS topics. So again, thank you, Jay. And let me go ahead and read off a couple of these questions that we got from our audience, and I'll throw them at you, Jay. So the first one is, what is the difference between filing a safety and health complaint with OSHA and filing a whistleblower complaint with OSHA?
Well, so, and I always say this to my clients or labor organizations or whomever, try and resolve the issue in-house before you call OSHA. I know sometimes that's difficult, but always try and do that first. Whenever you call OSHA and they come in, obviously that opens you up for citations and penalties and the government looking at your operations. But anyone can file a safety and health complaint with OSHA. You call the number, OSHA vets it, all right, because they know there's a lot of people who call for just wanting to file a complaint, but they vet it. And then if OSHA comes in, companies are not allowed to, retaliate. And so if you feel you were retaliated against, then you would file a whistleblower complaint. Okay. So that's the difference. One's the initial complaint about a safety and health issue. Then if you feel you are being retaliated against, then you would file a whistleblower complaint, right? And there's criteria about what is retaliation within the whistleblower standard. So as companies, you need to pay attention to that. And a lot of companies don't, and they get in trouble with whistleblower complaints.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So here's an interesting one. If OSHA is not granted access to a construction site, can they send a drone over the sidewalk barriers to investigate?
That is a great question, and that is being adjudicated right now. So there's a lot of, first off, I always recommend to my clients not to prevent OSHA from coming in. Be nice, find out what the issue is. But as soon as you deny access, all right, they can get a subpoena. With the drones, that's part of what's being adjudicated right now, whether they can or can't do that. So great question. I hope that's not happening to you right now. But I have a feeling they would be able to. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
All right, got a couple more. What can I do if my employer is not complying with OSHA's heat illness ruling?
Well, so the standard is not promulgated. It's not official law yet. They have a lot of recommended activities that you can do. Right now, it's covered under the general duty clause. So again, talk to your employer, express, hey, I feel like we're not complying with the guidelines are out there, because right now they're guidelines, okay? You can go to the heat illness standard and see what they are. If you feel they're not complying, have that conversation and say, look, this is what I feel is not being done. Have a good conversation. If you still feel like you're being ignored, then you have an opportunity to address it with OSHA if you feel that's appropriate.
All right, sounds good. One more question. How do you see pre-certification programs such as Avita, ISN, Prequel coming into play for companies?
Good question. So, and again, if you're not aware, there's a lot of pre-certification companies out there. As Tom said, Veta, ISN, Prequel, you can sort of Google them and check them out. But basically what they're doing is if you use a lot of subcontractors or you do work for bigger companies, they might ask you to submit your certificates of insurance, your training, your programs, your EMR documentation or experience modifier ratings into this program. And then the client company evaluates your performance and says yes, yay or nay, whether you can perform work for them. So they are proliferating. It's going to be a big trend in the next couple of years. And there are certain programs, I've dealt with all of these, and it's coming. So
Okay.
we can help you with that.
All right. And we got one more here. Does COVID fall under the general duty clause?
Yes, right now it does, except for healthcare. Healthcare, there's an emergency temporary standard. It does fall under the general duty clause. And, you know, companies have been cited for it. Most of the citations for COVID, though, are within healthcare. All right. I have not experienced in the last year and a half any citations for COVID directly covered under general duty. I've experienced under the respiratory standard for fit testing, where that citation was generated from the COVID issue. So OSHA came in, looked at what was going on, said, oh, you're not fit testing or training your employees under the respiratory standard. So, you know, now we all know what an N95 was. You know, 3 years ago, no one even cared. But that falls under the OSHA respiratory standard. So that's where they got cited. Good question.
Yeah. Great, Jay, thanks very much. Those are all the questions. So again, thank you very much to Jay. Thanks for everybody for attending. And thank you to Philomena, my admin, for putting this together and helping us coordinate it. If you have any further questions, our information is on the screen here. We're happy to help. Just give us a call and we'll see if we can be of any help. So thank you very much. And we appreciate it. And everybody have a great afternoon.
Take care, everyone.